Sahana Vavatu, Sahanao Bhunaktu, Sahaviryang Karavavahai, Tejasvina Vadhitamastu Ma Vidvishavahi. Om Shanti, Shanti, Shanti. So Krishna starts by showing Arjuna that the nature of Atma. He says, Panditaha na anushochanti. So Krishna was introducing to Arjuna the principle of Atma, something that is still new for Arjuna, which is understandably so because we don't hear about this unless we connect with the tradition. And he started out by saying that the wise people do not grieve for those who are not to be grieved for. And then the question was, and who are those who are not to be grieved for? And Krishna says those are who are either alive or who are no longer with us. So it's basically everyone. And so Arjuna was a little bit shaken up by this, and he thought, well, this is an inhumane way to think about it, maybe, if we initially hear this statement and you don't really think about, it's like, oh, so, this is a wise person's cold and detached and desireless, and all of these terms that you've heard before of how the Gita often gets taught, and what is a wise person, someone that's just distanced, and they don't sort of get involved, and you just watch everything happening, and they have no desires to help, and it's just all watching this world go through its little samsara, and the wise person is totally detached and has no connection to any of it. This is what most of us have heard, and it's often how Gita gets taught, but it's not at all what the Gita is teaching. Because, see, one very important thing is that when the scriptures get taught, there is what we call vachyartha. Vachyartha is called literal meaning. So this means that when I say to you, for example, bring me water, are you going to bring me like a big blob of water? Or you're going to fill in a word and you're going to fill in the word glass. So even though I literally said, bring me water, you did not literally bring me water. You knew there was something underlining, something deeper behind that statement. And therefore you filled in that word and you brought an extra component, the glass. So therefore, when we say direct meaning, like be desireless, Krishna will say, those who are not to be grieved for, those they don't grieve for those who are gone and not yet gone. So you look at this literally, and then you take it, immediately the mind creates this whole idea that a wise person is some kind of a disconnected, apathetic, non-sensitive person. But the reason why that's not true is because the scriptures always teach what we call lakshyartha. Lakshyartha is the implied or the deeper meaning behind a statement. And therefore, the deeper meaning is brought out through the tradition and through the teacher. But when the person looks at the Gita by themselves, there's a tendency to look at it literally. And this is why the Gita is so misinterpreted from different standpoints, because the person thinks, no, this is how it is. Krishna says you go to heaven, in Kena Upanishad, for example, last verse, chapter 4, it says that those who understand the nature of Atma, they go to the highest loka. And you say, I see they go to loka. I see this is exactly what the Upanishads is saying. They go to the highest loka. This confirms my idea that there is a world out there. So this is the tendency of the mind to look at it literally, vachyartha. And then the teacher says, you cannot have, because it says, I think it says, amritam nityatvam. So in other words, those who attain eternal heaven. This is the last verse in Kena Upanishad. And then the teacher says you cannot have eternal heaven because just the fact that it starts for the first time for you means it cannot be eternal. You say, well, of course it's eternal. It's just, it was there eternally, but just the fact that you went there, right, for the first time, it doesn't negate the fact that heaven is eternal. And then the teacher is going to counter that and say, well, it's still eternal from your standpoint because whoever goes up there right, it's going to begin once upon a time. And whatever begins from your standpoint is going to also end. Another way that you can dispute this through logic, and you can say, is that the fact that you have gotten up to heaven, how have you gotten up to heaven? Well, I've gotten up to heaven through actions. Well, every action that you have on your account is going to be finite. What do I mean by this? Well, if you meditate for 5 hours, you have not meditated for 5 hours and 1 minute. And you say, okay, fine, I'm going to meditate for that extra 1 minute. Well, you haven't meditated for 24 hours. Even if you meditate for 7 days in some samadhi, you haven't meditated for 8 days. So this means any action that happens within the scope of time is going to have what kind of a result? A time-bound result within scope of time. Therefore, if I meditate here and I do actions which get me up to heaven, then the quantity of those actions that I have gotten is the exact proportion to how long I will stay up in heaven. Therefore, heaven in that sense cannot be eternal because I have not done an eternal action. You understand this? I have not done an eternal action, therefore I cannot stay in heaven eternally. Therefore, heaven cannot be eternal, whoever goes up to heaven. So these are the kind of things that a teacher will bring out so that the student doesn't fall for this, imagery of the mind to imagine how Atma is some whiteboard canvas upon which you have 8 billion scripts written. And so now look at this. The mind is so amazing. It goes, this is amazing, easy metaphors. Can you give us more metaphors? The mind likes to create images. Understand this. This is how the mind works. This is how we remember, how we understand. It creates subtle or very gross images of concepts, so that when we introduce Atma, exactly the same happens. Why? Because you have been doing this since you were born. This is how we all learn. So the moment you bring in Atma, immediately what happens is, so Atma is just some canvas and everything is now written onto me, and I am that canvas, I am the substratum. And then it adds dimension because this is a 2D, this whiteboard, it's a 2D thing. So now you start to imagine reality like this 2D thing, like it's just flat reality. And everything's just being scribbled upon me, the canvas, whose intrinsic nature is existence awareness. And all of you are just a bunch of colored pens who are writing yourselves over me. And I am just free of whatever you write onto me, whether it is hate or love. So the mind, right, kind of goes into this mode. And the teacher constantly has to remind you that, look at this, even if last week you created an image in your mind, what do we say about the mind? We said that the mind changes 60,000 plus times a day. Therefore, even that imagination was just another part of the incidental scribble upon Atma. So now suppose you were listening, you're going, wow, this is so exciting. This is such a great metaphor. I've never heard this kind of a canvas color metaphor. I've heard other things, but this is like for the first time you're putting this forward and this is really making sense. And you're excited because the mind is enjoying creating, scribbling, imagining something new. And then the teacher says, stop. Even that scribble, even that tendency to now imagine, even that is part of your incidental attribute called the mind. That too is gone. No more, finished. But what remains is your I am, which is your intrinsic nature, the one that continues to aware the next moment of the mind when it's lost that high, which was perhaps there last week, and now the mind has lost its feeling good and it's it's gone. It's gone. But what is still there, lighting up that same mind, which had that imagination of canvas and Atma? I am, your intrinsic nature, Atma. Therefore, imagination also part of incidental. Concept, let me try to imagine this. It's all incidental because it's not going to be there the next moment, but you will be there the next moment. And thus, Krishna says to Arjuna that this Atma that we speak of is indestructible and it is your nature. And it is not that the wise person doesn't grieve because they don't care about others. or because they're sort of distanced from others. It's because they have something to fall back on. There's a much larger vision upon which the wise mind falls back on. And this, which it falls back on, is Atma. And now you say, okay, but look at this. How is this now relevant? Because Arjuna is, he's on the battlefield and he's receiving this lesson for his particular situation. But can you like bring this to us? Like, how is this relevant to me and you? Well, it's relevant because this question of your indestructible nature is what answers Arjuna's second question, which was existential or more fundamental, which was, how do I find fully filled I in this world whereby nothing can topple me over, nothing can, no wind, no challenge, no domestic affair can topple me over? How do I contact in quotes, how do I discover that place which is always fully filled and it's not conditional? It doesn't depend on my children getting a degree or, my husband, speaking to me in a certain way, or my wife kind of, treating me in a certain way. But what is that fully filled I which doesn't waver no matter what happens in life? And while it is fully filled, there is still a person, an incidental person, who is able to deal with challenges maturely without denying, because if you deny a situation, it's going to further add another conflict because you are violating the order of basic human decency. And basic human decency involves to attend to those things to which you are associated to. So if you're associated to a job or a worker or employee, then there's a certain expectation from you to deal with it in a sort of a mature, decent way. If I deny that in the name of I am beyond it, this is all just incidental scribbles on the nature of Atma. My boss is a scribble. Hello, Mr. Scribble. Hello, Mrs. Scribble, right? Then what happens is they're not happy with you. They give you, they replace you with someone else. And now you go, oh, it doesn't matter. Their layoff is just another scribble on me. So like this, it's kind of a convoluted way of thinking. And this is not what we're talking about. Therefore, Arjuna is talking about, how do I discover that fulfillment in life, which doesn't waver no matter what happens? And we can analyze this. Well, if you look at your experience, then you will see that behind every pursuit, what we're seeking for, besides situational, of course, this is everyone's got to deal with situations, but now we're talking about the fundamental. Besides situational, everyone is looking for that fulfillment, which doesn't waver. And if you ask yourself, has anything so far given me that? How close have I come to that using normal means of fulfillment? How close have I come to the fully filled I, which doesn't waver no matter what happens, while at the same time keeping with the things and doing and attending to duties as they required to be done? Right? How close have you honestly come to that fully filled I, which has no greater fulfillment, which nothing can take away from and nothing can add onto? This is an honest inquiry that the person has to ask themselves, from which we can start to bring this more into a relevant scope, a relevant teaching. And what Arjuna realizes is that, what all life really becomes about, what I just made up recently, I thought about this, is the new abbreviation called HEI, H-E-I. The whole life becomes about holding on to things, and then I want to extend what I've held on to, and then I want to intensify what I'm holding on to. So again, I want to now hold on to a good conversation, I want to extend a good conversation, and I want to intensify a good conversation. Now I want to hold on a beautiful, deep connection. I want to, extend that beautiful, deep connection, and I want to intensify that beautiful, deep connection. Now I want to hold on to my worldly success. I want to extend my worldly prosperity, my name and fame, and I want to intensify my name and fame. I want to hold on to good food. I want to extend the good food, and I want to intensify the pleasures that I get out of, right, consumables in this world. So the whole life, Arjuna starts to see, becomes about this abbreviation. Hey, it's like, hey, 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 right? Everyone's just saying, hey. And so he says, well, this means that conventional methods are not working. And it's such an example of this is that even if you're a healthy human being and you are, you are sensitive, you feel for somebody else's pain. And we all say this is a healthy human being. In fact, the Gita encourages us and will show us how to develop a healthy personality. And suppose you have a healthy personality and now you become very sensitive to other people's pains. This is an expression of compassion or empathy. It is the highest it's the highest, expression of your humanness. And now you start to see that, hey, I feel for this person's pain. You turn on the TV and you see what's happening to your community, to your people, to your country, to your state, to your nation, to the country, to the surrounding countries, to the whole world. And you feel, oh, I feel for it. I feel for it. But now, because you're so sensitive, what happens? Do you hear the news once? Do you hear person talking once? Not at all. You hear things coming all the time. So now every time you, right, feel for somebody else, it now ends up into one long mind of restlessness. So now the mind, even though it's healthy and it's able to feel for the other person's pain, becomes restless because it is sensitive and feeling into everyone's pain. And it's like this because you're always connected and there is some care for, right, naturally for your nation, for your people, for your race, for your your culture, for your religion. So naturally you will feel something. But because the world is constantly throwing these black or whites or opposing opinions, so now you constantly get kind of distracted and it's very hard to enjoy a tranquil mind. So this is amazing. Look at this. Healthy mind, and yet nothing to fall back on except situations. And therefore, the restlessness continues. Or, for example, you want to say, I'm just going to get really disciplined, like the 4-hour work week. Tim Ferriss, this author who wrote books about how to live a productive lifestyle by a 4-hour work week, by automating your business, automating, delegating all of those hard activities to outsourcing them and creating a life where you only work 4 hours a week. And this fella is, all about called hacking the brain. Let's hack your life. Let's hack the brain. And this fella is, talking about discipline. And now you say, okay, so this is the way I'm going to go. I'm going to be very disciplined human being. And I'm going to, right, live the scriptures to the line, like to the absolute line. Now, how many of us are actually able to do this, honestly? You wake up at the exact minutes of the alarm clock. In fact, you don't even need, you're beyond the alarm clock. You eat at the exact same time. You always have this, you chant the Gita, you do your puja, you do your prayer, you always connect to nature, you have a deep conversation with your partner. Every day, you ask your kids, you go through a protocol, ask them how they are, do they need something, there's something that I can change in myself. You go through a little kind of a self-checkup of your own, and you do this for 10 years straight without missing a day. Any hands go up? And even if the hand does go, yeah, exactly, it's going down. And even if the hand does go up, then chapter 14 of the Gita will not call you, but it will probably say there's a little bit of tamas going on there. There's a little bit of delusion going on there because the person has put themselves in this bubble where, I'm so great in my own little world. But in reference to somebody else, they will probably show you that there are some things to work on. So, this is also not a solution. Or you want to surround yourself with the environment that works very well. And this is possible for some time, but the thing is that your own desires, your own ideas of what the environment's supposed to look like, even that idea changes. So suddenly, right, you placed your sofa and you made your house and you painted it all red, and suddenly one wakes up and now they can't stand redness. It's just too passionate. I need something more calming. Give me some orange or something more, purple, some whatever, right? So even if you try to change your environment, because the environment is changing and your desires are changing and your ideas about what is the right life to live is changing, that too adds extra restlessness to the mind, even if your intentions are the best that they possibly can be. Why is all this the case? Because I have nothing higher to fall back on, because the nature of Atma is stripped out of my existence, and therefore the only thing that I can fall back on is improving situations, improving that first questions. How do I deepen our connection? How do I repair the relationship? How do I say sorry? How can we come together deeper? Everything becomes such a big deal. And it's like, and then you kind of get caught up in this, right? I get it. You get caught up in this because there is nothing to fall back on. The only thing that I can fall back on are the constant situations, demands that are expecting me to respond naturally so, and thereby, right, I get slowly kind of pulled into that, and you're back to square one. So there has to be a time, one time in your life when you say, this is all fine and it's all part of living. It's part of the human experience. And I'm not going to deny it for 1 second, because you have a certain swadharma, a duty that asks of you to contribute your talents and your skills to shine brightly in this world to whatever capacity that you can shine. But I also have to bring something much bigger in. And I want to just extend this inquiry just to make it a little bit more clear. Why is the mind going through situations so often? This is because everyone starts life like this. And because your parents also started out life like this, there was no one really to point out that there is something bigger than just situational demands. And what happens is when you get born naturally, right, with a connection to your body, you have a connection to your mind, and everyone has a connection to one body and one mind, which is your body and your mind. And then beyond that, there is a connection to another body and to another mind, and that's called your parents. And then you develop new connections to new bodies and new minds, and that is called friends. And then one of those bodies and minds, you develop a deeper connection, and that's called maybe someone that you deeply love right now. And, through that, you're able to grow together, able to talk about things. But either way, there is a body, mind communicating with each other, reinforcing each other's sense of individuality. So what happens one time is the person starts to, right, realize what I'm actually looking for is freedom from limitation of time, because everyone, whether they admit it or not, is concerned about mortality. And if not mortality, it is about, when you get kind of middle age, 40 or 50 onwards, it comes to you, right? You start to see that there is a decline, a certain decline of the mind, a certain decline of your looks. This is a natural part of the process. And so it becomes a more of a thing to pursue something to kind of get out of this time-bound existence. And so you're now desperately looking to get out of a time-bound existence, and nothing is really working. And so the first problem, just by coming with a body and mind, is I'm annoyed, I'm frustrated by my time-bound existence. If not kind of directly, then it comes in a later stage of life in a form of fear of death, of dying, and it becomes a topic that's generally uncomfortable to talk about. And then what does one do to, not make that so evident? Well, you surround yourself with more bodies, more minds, and surround yourself with roller coasters and, fancy things and children. And this is all good. However, there is also behind all of that, it is to cover up this idea that one day all of this is just going to ultimately end. And it's, you know, it's kind of like a, wow, what's the meaning of life beyond all of just doing and to the best of my abilities? What is higher than just doing all of this? The second thing that frustrates or that a person cannot stand, more or less, is ignorance. For example, when you are driving a car or someone's driving you and there is a car crash, someone has crashed, what's the first thing most people do? Yeah, you know exactly. Yeah, binoculars, David, right? You pull out your binoculars, and you want to know every detail, even though logically you know it's going to make no difference to your life. You're going to forget about the whole thing the moment you're like 50 meters in front because there's a new traffic light there. You have to be careful, right? And then you can't stand ignorance for even 1 second. You have to look immediately. And it's funny how you always look wherever you happen to be. But how many car crashes are happening right now? Why aren't you looking? Well, I don't care because it's not in my proximity. As long as it's in my proximity, only then I will look. So this means the person cannot stand being ignorant. I don't like to not know. Doesn't matter what I know, just the fact that I know something. This is why conspiracy theories can be such a big thing, because a person doesn't care what is the truth or not. They just want to know something. They just want to know some truth, some fact, some conspiracy, some whatever it is. I don't care what it is, but I can't stand being ignorant about anything. And therefore, it becomes another compulsion of life that pushes one forward to get degrees, to study, to get very educated, to read books. And how do we read books? Well, this is a whole different topic. We read books passively. And what's the worst way to read a book? It is by highlighting and reviewing your notes, believe it or not. If you really want to quadruple the amount of time that if you want to quadruple your learning capacities of your retention rate, then stop highlighting and reviewing, rather ask questions. How do I know this? Because I study Bloom. If you know Bloom, he was an educational psychologist who studied himself, education, how do people understand things deeply? And he studied this for his entire life. So if you really want to know how to learn and absorb information incredibly quickly, scary quickly, then study Mr. Bloom's what's called Bloom taxonomy. And Bloom taxonomy basically says that at the bottom level, right, what we mostly do is we review notes. And it gives you a false impression that you have mastered the topic because you are familiar, because the more you review something, the more familiar you become with it. And this familiarity gives you a false impression of mastery. What Bloom says is that if you really want to master something, you need to analyze the situation. That means you need to analyze how is this connected to that? And how is that meaningful to my life right now? And how is this playing out in people's behavior, in my behavior? And then even higher than analyzing is to create something new. So that, for example, if I say to you now, based on everything I said since we started out, give me a 2-minute presentation. What is the limitation of pursuing those things in this world which, by the very virtue of them changing, right, they cannot give you the fulfillment that you're seeking? And I asked you to give me a kind of a presentation, create it and put it together, right? Put it together based on the page of text that you have read or the 5 minutes of conversation that you have read. Create me a little 2-minute presentation for yourself in your own words and see what you come up with. If you're able to do that, Bloom says, and I know this from personal experience because this is how I study, you will understand a topic 20 times plus more than if you just go back to the notes and you highlight and you reread them over and over again. Just to struggle trying to come up with something yourself initially seems like it is taxing on you and it is inefficient. What the scientific studies show is that those students who have struggled, days later, when they showed the same test, they all excel. They all trumped those who studied and crammed it into one single session and highlighted the notes and thought they knew all of the information. And those who, right, in that group, they all kind of gotten low marks. But those who struggled through questions, trying to come up with answers, they all excelled much later, few days later, after having been retested. So this is another beautiful understanding of how to actually learn. This is why I encourage us, when you look at, the notes on the website or whatever, I'm sure you got some studies of your own. Don't just look at the notes and then highlight. I know it is so tempting to do this. Rather, now I tell you, it's so easy. You just copy and paste this text that you're reading, and you put it inside a Claude or AI, and you say, according to Bloom's taxonomy, create 7 questions to test my understanding. And let this thing create those questions for you, and then answer these questions, and you will be shocked how much you're enjoying the process. Maybe, at least I do. But second of all, how quickly you're able to master the topic, which before it took you maybe 2 months or 3 months to come to the same level as just answering questions. So this is another little tip. Now, going back to, I cannot stand information. This is how we kind of sidetrack into book mode. So the first is, I cannot stand being, a time-bound entity. The second is, I cannot stand not knowing about things, and therefore I want to learn and learn and learn and learn. And thirdly is, I can't stand being this small individual, who feels like I'm not making like any big difference in this world. And so these three, all of the actions that you do in this world constitute trying to appease one or more of these three, trying to kind of relieve myself from this, time-bound existence, and therefore, prolonging, your life through genetical research, through health, lifestyle, through what we call Qigong for health, which I was myself once, I started to learn. Qigong has different modes. There's Qigong for self-defense, Qigong for spiritual growth, Qigong for longevity. And I just happened to be in a longevity lineage. I didn't even know this. And the longevity lineage is all about, using body and techniques and breathing and lifestyle to extend your life. And then much later, I started to contemplate on this, like, this is not like really what I want. It's good, but it's not what I really want. I want just for kind of, a healthy body in general. But there is longevity. So this is another thing that the person wants to bring into their life to hopefully extend their life. So as long as, right, these three are true, that means my identity is placed into my body and mind, which is made to suffer, made to have joys and, and lovely, experiences, and made to go through pains, then all of the actions that a person ever does, it is only to solve one or more of these three, more or less. And you're like, wow, so my whole life, buying things, going here, going there, ultimately, it is to relieve myself from my time-bound existence. It is to know about something, or it is just to feel a little bit bigger than I feel right now. We call this, increasing the size of your I sense, the size of your little individuality. So now Arjuna sees that this doesn't make sense, because a limited action, as I said, every action is bound to time. By the virtue of it being bound to time, if it's 5 minutes, it's not 6 minutes. In that sense, it is bound to time. A limited action plus a limited action plus a limited action plus a limited action. How many of those plus ones do I have to add to come to infinity? Because that's what you want. You want a limitless result. You want to be fully filled. What does fully filled mean? It means there is nothing more that can fill me up. As long as it is not full, there is some space to keep on filling. Fill up the eye, fill up the eye, fill up the eye. So this means what I'm really seeking for is a completely fully filled eye. In that sense, what I'm seeking for is limitlessness, infinity. Now, one action plus another action, all of them being finite in nature, by logic alone, can never fully fill this I. Because where is my Atma placed? Where is my identity placed? In that which is never fully filled, like your body. Your body may be fully filled today. I can have a very deep conversation with you, and we can all feel like we're all, we're connecting so deeply. But then tomorrow, it's a brand new day. So who got fully filled? The person of yesterday, the body, mind of yesterday. What about the person today? Back to square one, back to default. Now, what does this new person want? To fully fill him or herself up again. So it is doing the same thing that I've done yesterday. By the mere virtue of this body-mind being different today than it was yesterday, and it will be different tomorrow, this means whatever I have done to that body-mind yesterday no longer applies to this body and mind. It applies, but not completely as much as it did yesterday. It goes back to square one, goes back to your default. And by the mere virtue of this body-mind being never filled, it's going to again look for moments of being fully filled today. So the whole life really becomes about trying to fully fill an instrument which by the mere virtue of itself can never be fully filled. And this becomes a whole industry of what we call personal development, of self-help, of thinking positive, of doing right, dharma, doing the right thing, which are all important. But if I have nothing beyond that, then this becomes an end of itself. Fully filling an object that can never be fully filled becomes an end of itself. And that doesn't work. And Arjuna sees this for the first time very clearly, because he says, even if I get a war that is in my favor, and I get a kingdom, and I, kind of resolve all of this, crime that's going on and spreading of this adharma, and I put it in its right place, even then there is a I who is not fully filled. Why? Because my I is placed in the wrong place. It is placed in a body and mind. And thus Krishna, wants to now help Arjuna come out of this understanding. And there's a story of this to maybe some story mode to, kind of demonstrate. So there was two fellas who met up in a train cart. And, one of the fellas was counting money. And it's kind of a weird thing you do, right? You just met up with someone, and while you're talking to them, you're like counting all of the money you have right in front of them. But anyway, this guy maybe had too much trust. So, and they're having a good conversation, and they're seems to be good friends. And this other fella is watching this fella counting money and is going, this guy has a lot of money. I think I'm gonna wait for him to fall asleep tonight, and I'm just gonna, definitely take all of his money. And then when he wakes up next morning, he's gonna say, "Where's my money?" And I'm just gonna say, "Oh, someone came inside our cart and he stole my stuff. He obviously stole your money. So this is gonna be very easy to trick him." And now what happens? They both fall asleep, and it's 2 o'clock in the morning. And this fella goes, "Aha, time to start my adventure." And now he starts to seek underneath everywhere, the wallet, his pockets, under his little packets, underneath the bed, underneath the mattress, underneath his pillow, and he's just looking and looking, and there's no money at all. And this guy's so tired, he's been searching for 1 hour, and he's got to be very quiet, which takes extra energy to move this slow, because you don't want to be heard, right? So it's very taxing on your energy. So he wakes up a little bit grumpy because of this procedure. And the moment he wakes up, he sees this fella again counting money. And he's like, where did he have this money? This is amazing. I'm definitely going to take his money tonight. It's good that he still has his money. So this means it's in the same cart, no problems. So they again talk, Again, they fall asleep, 2 o'clock in the morning. And this guy goes, okay, this time I'm definitely going to find it. And now he's, got new strategies. Now he looks even like underneath his pants, like more kind of, stranger places. And same thing, he cannot find the money anywhere. And this guy, oh, I'm so frustrated. Now they wake up and this guy admits, he says, hey, you know what, man? You've been counting your money and I just wanted to steal it. Where did you keep your money? I want to steal your money. And, it's kind of an honest thief. And the fella says, when I was counting my money initially, I noticed that you didn't have pure intentions. So I knew that you were going to look for my money, and I hid it underneath a place that you would absolutely never look at. And where was that?
Underneath his pillow, the prospective thief's pillow.
Exactly. So in other words, I'm going to hide it in a place, the last place that you would ever suspect, and that is underneath your own pillow. And this fellow was gobsmacked because, how he could have missed something it was so close to him. It was like so close to him, and he totally missed the mark. So it shows you how, right, in this world, what we do is we always kind of have this tendency to look out, and it's all out there. It's in the other, it's developing a deeper connection with someone. It's developing a connection with the world, which is all good. So in other words, we always look out there, and we look right out there in the body and in the mind. The mind is also out there, remember, because the mind is also another kind of a place. And so what now, and you would never suspect that, what you're looking for is the closest thing to you. And how does Krishna demonstrate this? He says, there was never a time when you and I did not exist. And this is how the teaching starts. And it shakes up Arjuna, like, whoa. So I've been looking under everyone's pillow, and now you're saying that what I'm looking for is actually the closest thing, and I already enjoy what I'm looking for, which is freedom from a time-bound existence. Because you just said to me, Krishna, the Lord of the universe, there was never a time when I was born, and there would therefore never be a time when I will die. Because if I was never born, that means I always existed. That's what never born means. I always existed. This whole concept of being born, by the way, this has to go, because the linear system of the Western world has to drop when it comes to the Vedic system of a creation that simply never began. Because the mind wants to put a beginning, and there was a first time, once upon a time, when it all came. In the Vedas, we will slowly understand the creation never started. It was always going on. There was never a time when it just came out of nothing. And therefore, there was never a time when you started. And there will therefore never be a time when you will end. Now, this is a strange thing to hear, because you're thinking, well, all my life, I'm identified with things that are coming and kind of showing up and going away, including, my states of mind. So the whole spiritual world, right, for the most part, is about what? It's about changing your state of mind. It's about entering new levels of consciousness. You probably heard this before. Let's explore levels of consciousness. So it's all about, right, states of mind. And yet Krishna says, irrespective of the state of mind, which is something that is born and something that comes and goes and it dies, there is something about you that never comes and never goes, which has always existed, and therefore it cannot be your state of mind or levels of consciousness, because levels of consciousness once upon a time were not there yesterday, and now I've heard about a guru tell me about entering a level of consciousness, and now a level of consciousness is born, and therefore it is not what we're talking about. Or for example, someone tells you about a meditation, and it says, if you do this meditation, if you go through a certain procedure, like Kriya Yoga has many of them, and you will enter a certain state. You will come in contact with something. That means something will be born for the first time that is not here right now. And you have to do an action for that thing to be born. That is not what Krishna is talking about. He's talking about that which was present even before whatever it is that you're seeking comes. Therefore, whatever is being sought is never the seeker. In other words, the seeker is already the sought. This is what I really want to say. The seeker is the sought. Whatever the seeker is looking for, the seeker already is that. And what is the seeker looking for? Eternity, immortality, freedom from time-bound existence. And that is exactly what Krishna says. There was never a time when you were not. Therefore, there has to be something about me, the seeker, who is already enjoying an existence which is not limited to time. And how does Krishna show this? He shows this through a prakriya. And he says that there is, two principles to understand. The first is something about you, which is not essential to yourself, which is called the incidental attribute. We said the name for this is Tatastha Lakshana. Tatastha Lakshana means it is not essential in reference to the existence of something else. So, for example, this pen is not essential to the existence of the board, because this pen can do whatever it wants, right? But it's not essential to the existence of this whiteboard, whose nature is non-sticky. That means nothing sticks onto that which is essential for something else. So we have two words. We said one is incidental and one is intrinsic. Okay. Now, incidental means it is not essential. It is not essential in reference to something else. And intrinsic means it is essential in reference to something else. So now, for example, this pen is incidental. Why? Because it is not essential to the whiteboard, to the existence of the whiteboard. I can draw here, I can do stories and scribbles, but then in one sweep, when I go like this, what have I erased? The incidental or the intrinsic? What is being erased? The incidental. In that sense, incidental was not essential, because the erasing never erased the whiteboard. It only erased the non-essential. Board is essential for the presence of the colors, but the colors are not essential for the presence of the board. Okay. Now, when it comes to incidental, now let me bring it to our body and mind to make it a little bit more intimate. What about the body? The body is undergoing changes. So not only does incidental mean it is not essential, it also means it is going through modifications and changes, right, constantly. So there's not one part about your body that is the same now and now. So in that sense, it is an incidental attribute. It is as though a little scribble that is like this right now, and the next moment it is like this. And now it's like this. And all of it becomes, right, not essential for the existence of you. Just like this becomes non-essential for the existence of the whiteboard. And what about your mind? Well, we said that your mind, has changed how many times since the morning? It's changed quite a bit. It's changed over, 60,000 times, they say, just for, to see your kitchen. Your mind is now taking the shape of a kitchen. And then you turn your head towards, and you look at some trees, then your mind is taking the shape of trees. So your mind is constantly changing every time new sense data enters your eyes and your ears. And emotions, right? You could, for example, somebody, you feel good, right? You wake up and you feel lucid, your mind is lucid, and, and therefore it gives a corresponding emotion of kind of lucidity and lightness. But then fatigue sets in, at evening time, and then the mind has not only kind of become more heavy, but there's also a corresponding emotion to follow that heaviness of the mind. And so you have two incidental things which are not essential for the existence of I. And then you have something like your senses. Your senses are, also you wake up and you have clear vision. And then by evening time, suppose you've been looking at a computer screen a lot, and then your senses are a little bit, blurry, or so the senses themselves have changed. So even the senses are not essential for the existence of I am, I am. And then you have your desires and your inclinations. What are your desires and inclinations? It is what you desire now, right? You desired something in the morning, and then in the evening, you will desire something else, okay? So your desires are also going through change. So whatever changes is called your incidental attributes. So everything about your body is undergoing modification, mind, emotions, right? Thoughts about who you are, who you're not, all of that is undergoing modification. What else is going modification? Your hearing loss as we age, that too has undergone modification. And your desires, what you desire one moment, and you can go to somebody else's house, and now it's a totally different person. Did you ever notice this? How you can go to two places, and in one place you act like one way, and you go to a different place, or a friend comes over and you're a totally different person. Where did that old person go? Where did that old person go? Wow, they've gone. It's a different person that has come in altogether. But do you feel like you have gone? Do you feel like you have gone? Not really. The only thing that has gone is that personality for a moment. And a new personality has now come in because this person is now influenced by the presence of this friend, or influenced in the presence of this environment. But there is something about me, even though the person has totally changed, there is something about me that has not gone at all. So the whole person in that sense becomes incidental. That means becomes non-essential to that which was underlining that old person, and this brand new, fresh, excited person who is acting totally different, like a clown or professional when confronted in a different environment. So in that sense, the person, everything about you becomes incidental, and there is something about you that becomes intrinsic. And now, what is intrinsic?
Seeker and the sought we were talking about a few minutes ago.
Yeah.
And these days, there's a lot of discussion always happening, a parallel between this topic and quantum physics.
Okay.
And how do you relate quantum physics in layman's terms with the incidental and intrinsic?
So quantum physics, you cannot quite put in a model of Vedanta, because quantum physics will stay at the level of the incidental, and they won't have any kind of a reality to contrast it against. So whatever is discussions are taking place in quantum physics, it's only in reference to, for example, quarks, or something that is underlining smaller than quarks, like photons or gravitons. So even that is just different kinds of energy that will depend on something else for its existence. So for example, right, you take like electron, which makes up the atom. The electron is nothing but quarks. So the entirety of the electron is just a bunch of quarks put together that makes up the electron. And then the electron, right, you add a proton and a neutron, and now you call it an atom. So now you got an atom, and that atom you put, for example, two hydrogen atoms and one oxygen atom, and now you have a molecule called water. So their entire discussion will deal with the world of incidental. but they cannot quite, they don't know what does it all reduce into? What is the final substance into which all of these incidental attributes, like the smallest, like graviton and photon, and which is light, and quark, what does it all ultimately reduce to? What is the substratum upon which it all just rests on? This is still a question that is being debated. And the closest they have come in quantum physics is string theory. And what are strings? Well, strings are something that is even smaller than a quark. And it's a hypothetical model where it is intelligent strings which are intelligent. So it's kind of close to what we're talking about with Ishvara, but it is not close at all. Why? Because strings, and I've done research on this, strings are still within space and time. So this means they still depend on an accommodator of those strings, and they're still within time. So look at this. Even the smallest particle, they're still within space and time. But Vedanta talks about even space and time is incidental. Never mind strings. Even space and time is incidental, but they're not even at space and time. Yes, you can say it's relative, but as to what is space and time made of, this is yet to be discovered in the world of quantum physics or science. And Vedanta has a model for this, which I will talk about much later. There's 5 elements and there's intelligence. I will talk about all of this. So again, the question was, what is the final, statement in terms of incidental and intrinsic? Is that it is all within incidental. Intrinsic is yet to be discovered. And so where does science end? Where does science end? Strings, space and time. Where does Vedanta continue? That which is before space and time, that which is the content of space and time. So therefore, science takes you up to a certain level, but you still cannot reconcile how did all of this come about? What was before the universe of time and space was born? So they will say, once upon a time, a Big Bang. And when the Big Bang came, then space and time arose also. But what you cannot say is that, so space and time was born, but then what was before time? They don't know. And Vedanta will have an answer to this, which we will go into extensive detail.
So can we say intrinsic is about consciousness and a void or a space?
It is the word, specifically, it's the word consciousness or awareness. Okay, they're synonymous words, but in terms of void or shunyata or emptiness or space, this is a different model, which Vedanta will add clarity to this, but it is not emptiness, it is not void, and it is not space, nor it is time. It is specifically consciousness or awareness. They're synonymous words. So whenever I say consciousness in Vedanta, I also mean awareness. When I say awareness, I also mean consciousness. Now, I haven't defined quite what is consciousness and awareness. This is yet to be done, but I just want you to know that I will interchange these 2 words. So there's no need to ask me, is consciousness the same as awareness, and vice versa.
Yeah, thanks for that clarity. But the intrinsic one falls in the consciousness attributes?
Yeah, which is not an attribute, because if it's an attribute, then you have to give it, like, what attribute would you like to give it? See, consciousness is something which is attributeless. That means it has no attributes. So that's why I say it's intrinsic nature rather than intrinsic attribute. Yes, some teachers will say intrinsic attribute, but I just want to make that clarity there. It's intrinsic nature.
Because it doesn't fall in the objective category, it's always subjective.
It doesn't fall under the subjective or the objective, correct? Yeah. Subject, object are only in reference to, they're both expressions of, they're manifestations of one reality.
Thank you.
And
Thanks,
I can, of course, explain this subject object, but this is not the right time because I cannot put it all into a very short amount of time. But I will use dream example much later to show you that even the subject and the object, which is a preliminary understanding in Vedanta, even that has to go away. Because I know this teaching where you're the subject and everything else is an object, but then that too will eventually, I will, help us reconcile that there is no such thing as subject and object. It's just a preliminary understanding. Just like when in Vedanta we say neti neti, not this, not this, not this. This is also a preliminary understanding that you have to go past. So all of this I will use, but I will guide us out of these tools. They're just mere tools, understand this. And therefore, to reconcile that all that is here is Ishvara. All that is here is one without a second. This is the final understanding. But to come to that understanding, I will use tools like subject, object, and not this and not that, and so on. Yeah.
If I reframe it, I would say the journey from duality to non-duality.
Good. Yeah. So it is a journey, and that journey has certain tools. And these tools are called prakriyas or methods in English.
Yeah.
And therefore,
thank you.
Good. And therefore, Sat, what is this intrinsic nature? The intrinsic nature is of the nature of Sat, and Sat means it is existence, which means it is a presence that never ceases to exist. And in the presence of this presence, whatever shows up in it, it comes to be known as a changing, modifying thing. So in other words, it makes known all of the changes that are happening or taking place. And what did Krishna say? There was never a time when you did not exist. And what is Sat? The presence which was never born, presence which never dies, presence which always continues exactly as it already is. And Krishna says, there was never a time when you were born, nor that you will ever cease. Therefore, what is Krishna referring to you as? Sat. And then Krishna says, what is the nature of this Sat? What is the nature of this presence, which is eternal, infinite, eternal backwards, infinite forwards? That means it never ends. What is the nature of it? It is of the nature of, it can't be inert, because whatever shows up in this existence, just the fact that it is lit up, it is known to a conscious being, it means an existent conscious being, it means it cannot be inert. It has to be awareful. It has to be conscious. So what kind of a Sat or existence is it? It is an awareful existence. It's not just some existence that is just floating around. It is awareful. It is, it gives consciousness to whatever manifests in the light of existence awareness. It becomes an object revealed. It becomes an object known. It becomes an object observed. Why is the object observed in the presence of existence awareness? Because the nature of existence awareness is that which makes it known. It brings it to light. Ah, here it is. Here it is. What is that which brings light to your thoughts? Not your mind. According to Krishna, it is not your mind. What is it that brings light to your emotions and your epiphanies and your trials and tribulations and and ideas and knowledge and ignorance? What is it? It is not your mind. It is this very Sat and Chit that is spoken of. In other words, it is an awareness that brings to light even the ignorance of your mind, and equally brings to light the ignorance and the knowledge of your mind. For example, if I say to you now, what is 1 + 1? Oh, I know. Happy, right? What's happy now? The mind is happy. What is revealing the mind? What is observing the mind being happy? How it knows what 1 + 1 is? Sat and Chit. Whatever it is that's revealing, that's observing it, is Sat and Chit. But now look at this. How far away is the sun from the earth? In miles or kilometers, please? Exact number. Oh, mine doesn't feel good. Now, all of the emotions, there's a rush of emotion, all of the emotion from the brain floods the body and go, oh, I don't feel good about this at all. The mind doesn't know, the body doesn't know. So not only the mind doesn't know, but it communicates with the brain, and the brain sends corresponding emotions and floods the body with it, and the body doesn't feel good at all, not knowing something, because we said no one can stand ignorance. What is observing that condition of the mind and body? According to Krishna, it is not the mind and body, it is Sat and Chit. That which is always underlining the base of all of your, right, all of your bodies and mind states that are going, coming, and, you know, leaving and coming forwards, again leaving, the base on which all of these experiences of your body and mind are going on. And in the presence of you, the observer, those conditions are constantly revealed. In other words, what knows, I know Asha, what knows about your mind's ignorance and knowledge? I am, I am, I am. The same I that knows that I don't know who I am is the exact same I that knows I know who I am. So awareness in existence is not under the spell of ignorance of your nature. What is under the spell of ignorance of your nature? Your mind is. What reveals, what observes the mind not knowing who this observer is? What observes that? I am, I am, I am. All of the ignorance belongs to the mind. All of the knowledge belongs to the mind. It has nothing to do with one existence, one awareness, which is intrinsically free of all of the attributes of the body and mind, not only from my standpoint, but also from your standpoint. That means nothing sticks onto it. If there's a little tick on the mind, says, oh, I know what 1 + 1 is. That is in the presence of one I am. If there's a cross, I don't know what I am. I have no clue who I am or what I am. That fact is revealed because of the same I am that was observing or revealing the I know who I am.
The same point. How do I know I don't know?
Yeah, so how do I know that I don't know? Because in the presence of I, who is not subject to knowledge or ignorance, there is a mind which gives you either a tick or gives you a cross. And because I am the base of the mind, I am the foundation of the mind, the existence awareness upon which this mind is, then in the presence of I, there is a, not knowing. In the presence of I, there is a knowing. Now, okay, now where do we confuse our identity? Look at this. Where is the problem? The problem is we get identified with I don't know. That means the board now is like inside this little bubble. I don't know. That's called identifying with the mind, identifying with ignorance. And yet the fact that I don't know, the fact that I know that I don't know, the fact that I know that I do know is only because of the one intrinsic presence on which the knowing mind, that means the mind that kind of knows what 1 + 1 is, and the not knowing mind, both of them get lit up by one light. Just like one light. Right now, I shine a torchlight. And I shine a torchlight on a person who is having a hard time. And I shine the same torchlight onto a person who is just having a great time. Two different conditions, two different bodies and minds, experiencing totally different states of mind. One light not affected by either, and at the same time, in the presence of this one light, I can see, frustration, total joy, cheer. The light doesn't get affected at all. It's non-sticky. It just shows up. It just reveals whatever is going on to your body and mind. Sanjeev?
It means to say, going back to Asha's question, in state of I know, and in state of I do not know, and in the state of I'm confused, I never leaves me. Is that right?
In the presence of I, Sat and Chit, there is a mind that knows, there is a mind that doesn't know. So when we say, I know that the mind doesn't know, I know that the mind knows. So it becomes a little bit more easier to understand if you don't use the double I. If you say, I know that I don't know, if I know that I do know, it becomes a lot easier if you say, in the presence of I, there is a mind which knows. In the presence of existence awareness, there is a mind that does know. It becomes a little bit easier like this. Okay, Vijay?
So-
Yes, Sanjeev?
Sorry, it means if I need to reframe again, I can say awareness never leaves me, irrespective of my mind conditioning or the state.
Just
Is
the
that right?
Just the fact that your mind conditions are known means that awareness is never left.
So attention of the awareness never leaves the state of mind, regardless what state I am in.
No matter what state your body and mind is going through, whether your mind is highly alert or whether your mind is very dull and it's just not, everything's going over your head, or if things are going over the head. In the presence of awareness, all of that is lit up. All of that from beginning to end, it's all shun. It's all lit up. It's all known. It's all observed. Who is observing that? I am.
Yeah. Andre, my last question is, before I go to Vijay, if I'm into deep sleep, let's say if I'm into deep meditation, I do not know where I am and I'm totally timeless. Does this I/awareness leaves its field?
The I is never, there's no question of being freed or not. It was always as itself. It's always intrinsically free of everything. So right now, in the presence of this body and mind being alive, right, there is aliveness. Now, the aliveness belongs to the body and mind. Now, this body and mind temporarily resolves during deep sleep. But what doesn't resolve is the same I am that is revealing or observing this person now speaking to you, and this person kind of, having a conversation. Now it's a little bit easier. It's a little bit easier with a dream, because with a dream, you know that, right? The exact same I am that's here is the exact same I am that's inside the dream. So that's why when we wake up, you say, did you dream? And you say, I dreamt. So what do you, now when you say I dreamt, what is this the word dream in reference to? I dreamt. It's in reference to the mind. The mind was producing images, very funny, weird images, but who was there in the dream? I was. Now that same I continues in deep sleep. How do you know that if there's no life in deep sleep? Well, you can use a certain logic, and that is, who is afraid to go to deep sleep? Anyone afraid? No. Do you look forward to deep sleep? Everyone looks forward to deep sleep. Even though the person called Andre or Sanjeev won't be there in deep sleep, why am I looking forward to deep sleep? Because there is something about me that will be finally free of Andre. They will be finally free of this limited person. Just the fact that you are looking forward to sleep. When you say, I can hardly wait to go to sleep, are you talking about your dream? No, you're talking about that place which is other than the dream, that place where there is no life. That means there is no fear of going out of existence, which means I am not going to go out of existence. If you knew you were going to go out of existence, we will all be scared to go to deep sleep, but we're not. Implying I will be very much there, the same one that is over here. That means there's a connection between that one in deep sleep and this one in the waking. Were there to be no connection, then you would not want to go to sleep, because who wants to go out of existence? And the fact that there is no life, look at this, the fact there is no life in deep sleep and you're looking forward to deep sleep means what? Whatever will not be in deep sleep, which is your body and mind, and you're looking forward to deep sleep, which means I'm looking forward to be free of that which I am not. Just like when a mosquito bites you, you want to be free of that which I am not as a body. You want to scratch and scratch and scratch and scratch because it doesn't belong on you. That means you want to get rid of that which you are not. In that same way, I want to get rid of that which is pulling me down, which is limiting my nature, and that is called your body and mind. Now, it's not actually limiting your nature, and I will explain how is that the case in a further example, because I know it feels like you are limited right now, but this is only apparent. It is not actual, and I will demonstrate this how. Vijay?
Yeah, Andre, now that you spoke of deep sleep, also we don't have any external objects, people, nothing in sleep, and we feel so good. So essentially means that that's our true nature, right? That's where there's total peace. Okay, coming back to when you say mind, you're also referring to the intellect, I guess, right? Because I say I don't know or I know more from the intellect than from my mind.
The mind is divided into 4 functions: your intellect, your manas, your emotional system, your I sense, ahamkara, and your memory. When I say mind, I could be talking about any of those 4. It doesn't really matter. So buddhi is really just the mind. Memory is just the mind. Your sense of I is just the mind, right? And your emoting system is the mind. It's all one mind. It's just all one antahkarana, inner instrument word we use in Sanskrit. Antahkarana, inner instrument. That's a Sanskrit word.
Your example of the board that is behind you, that's like the pure awareness state, which is our true essence, which is the I am, and then everything just appears on that. And we've always been that, and there is no beginning or end. It just is that oneness or that isness or suchness or whatever you call that.
Yeah, so this is a good identification. So it was a metaphor, and what I meant to show was that your nature doesn't get contaminated, it doesn't get tainted by the story of your life. So whatever actions, right, you've done, you as the body mind person has done, it doesn't taint, because it's not essential. It can be erased like that in one instant. But what you cannot erase is that which was, according to Krishna, never born and will never cease to exist. In other words, all that Krishna wants to point out is there is something about you that is constant. And because it was beginningless, pure, and uncontaminated, it has to be also, right now, pure and uncontaminated.
I was just going to say a pure awareness.
Yeah,
that...
so I don't use the word pure. I just say awareness. We don't put adjectives onto awareness or consciousness. There's only awareness. There's only consciousness. So there's no need because if I say pure, the mind's going to come up with there's impure now. That's how the mind is. Yeah. So just awareness. What is your intrinsic nature? It is of the nature of Chit. That means it is the existence which never comes and leaves. It is always equally true as itself, as its eternal self. And what is the nature of this eternally self existence? This existence which is eternal, it is a awareful existence. That means it is not some inert existence. Now, how we often think of awareness or the word consciousness is it is a process of the mind. For example, we say, are you aware of ecological issues? This is the worldly definition of awareness or consciousness. It is not what I'm talking about. I'm not talking about, hey, are you aware to the fact that you're late 5 minutes? I'm not talking about that awareness. That awareness word refers to alert. So a better way to say it is, are you alert to the fact that your body and mind has shown up 5 minutes late? That's a little bit more clearer way to say it. Now, if you now in Buddhism, the word consciousness and awareness never refers to what Advaita Vedanta says. For them, all sects of Buddhism, and you'll see an article on my website where I've listed different Buddhisms, the word consciousness and awareness in every single sect in Buddhism will refer to process of the mind. So this is why we don't kind of, say what, Buddhism is saying and what consciousness is, what Advaita is saying, because it's a different terminology altogether. So don't even try to reconcile it. You're just going to fall into so many, try to make it all the same. It doesn't work. It doesn't work. So now we don't mean awareness or consciousness in a way that Buddhism means, or the way that the world means, which is just the process of the mind. What we mean is that which lights up your experience. It just lights up your experience. That's all it does. You know, it enables you to see, enables your mind to see the changes that are happening from morning to evening, all lifelong. That's all it does. It's not that it's doing it. It's not like I'm going to make you see. Just by the virtue of existence awareness, in the presence of it, whatever shows up is observed to be changing. And if you look at it logically, you can never be something that is changing. Because if you were the changing, you could not identify changes. If body-mind was your intrinsic nature, then you could not tell apart this body-mind from the previous body-mind. Just the fact that there is an identification of changes going on in reference to your mind, in reference to your thoughts, means there is something underlining which is not going through the same states that the mind is going through. It is remaining the same. In reference to the sameness, I can tell there is a difference. And what is it that identifies the differences? What is it that identifies experiences? It is, according to Krishna, Sat and Chit. Just like if you're, on a train and you can only say that the train is moving. Why? Because if you look outside the window, there is a world that is not moving. And like that, in reference to a non-moving, there is an identification that there is something moving. So imagine we are now, on the, drama of life, and we're all on a one big stage, and everyone is affecting everyone. You say one thing, I get angry, I say one thing, you get angry, you're cheerful now, and we're all just, having a great time communicating, and it's just one big, drama, and it's a big deal, right? But then there is only one light that is lighting up and enabling us to see each other. So I can only see Gautam's face, happy or cheerful, or whatever it is, only because of that one light. I can only see Lorena's face, pretty face, because she's she's like this. But I can only say she's like this. Why? Because of the one light on the stage. The moment the light turns off, the drama can no longer take place. Because we all depend, our minds and our bodies depends on one revealer, one light to bring to awareness all of the drama that's going on between us. Suppose we can only communicate in facials. So this means we all depend on this one intrinsic I am, in the light of which experiences of the drama of life are taking place. And how many dramas? Well, 8 billion, but it's easier for you. You got the drama of 4 people, drama of 2 people, drama of however many people, but that drama is only known to everyone because of this one light. And according to Krishna, this one light, this one revealer, one light on whom the drama of life of your own body and mind is taking place, is Sat and Chit.
Is it okay to say that awareness is a function of mind, and what gives awareness, what reveals awareness, is the consciousness?
No, awareness and consciousness are strictly the same words, Therefore, we cannot say that awareness is a function of the mind, but the function of the mind takes place because of awareness. The functions of the mind, thinking, right, calculating, emoting, takes place because it's in the presence of awareness. Just like the function of this pen, suppose, is to constantly go calculate 1 + 1 + 2 + 3 + 5. That's all your mind does. It just calculates, it analyzes all day long. All of that is taking place because of it's in the presence of this one awareness. It's in the presence of you.
Is this experiential awareness same as the awareness that you're referring to?
Experiential awareness specifically means the function of the mind. Specifically means states of the mind that are constantly changing. So in other words, we never use experiential awareness. We would rather use the words experiential states of mind. Like gears, imagine your mind is just like a bunch of gears, turning and clamping and making noises, But the witness of those noises, the witness of those functions, the witness of those images that are all being created by the mind is you. And that you is not the mind, that you is awareness. Like the light. So you are the light who is now lighting up this experience of this person called Gautam having a conversation to Andre. And now Gautam's brain is now listening to these words and it is thinking, what is Andre saying? Or maybe it is not thinking. And now Andre is going to give it a little test and says, hey, Mr. Instrument called Gautam, which is made up of body and mind, do this calculation for me. 1 plus 1, go on, plus 2.
Yeah, 4.
Plus 2.
6.
Plus 8.
14.
Plus 1.
15.
Plus 2.
17.
Whatever is observing this going on between us is Sat and Chit. Whatever is calculating that is called Gautam, is called body and mind. Whatever was observing the mind going 8, 15, 17, that was the mind, that was the instrument. In the presence of whom was all of that known? In the presence of I am. Existence awareness.
So the consciousness is lighting the experience that we are having.
Correct. Consciousness is lighting up the experience of the person called Gautam. Consciousness, the same consciousness is lighting up the experience of Andre's body mind now speaking to Gautam.
So if I use the word consciousness and awareness as a noun, then it is what I am. But the moment I use it as a verb, then it becomes an experience, and that is what I'm.
Yeah, but we don't want to use it as a verb anymore because Vedanta doesn't use it in that way.
I asked you about the soul. Is it same or is it different for everyone? And you said it is same for everyone.
Yeah.
Similarly, is Sat and Chit, is it same for everyone, or this Sat and Chit specific to everyone?
Atma means I am. Atma means the presence in whom all experiences are revealed, are known. That Atma is Sat and Chit in reference to one individual. So the word Sat and Chit means existence awareness, which is all pervasive. It's everywhere. Everything is existence awareness. So you are right now everywhere. I am everywhere. But it seems like I am here, and it seems like you are there. Why? Because of the body-mind confinement. But whatever is lighting up the experience of Pankaj and whatever is lighting up the experience of Andre is the same Atma, is the same existence awareness. So 2 words have been introduced. I'll just clear this up. Sat and Chit. Sat Chit is existence awareness. And then we have another word, Atma. Now, Atma is simply Sat and Chit in reference to an individual. Same thing, existence awareness in reference to an individual. You don't have to use Atma. You can use Sat and Chit also. But it is one existence awareness. Now, still, I have to show you how is it the same. This will come in further verses. It's not time yet, but I will show this definitely.
Yeah, this means kind of summarizing. Everyone in the world is striving or yearning to that state, what we call nirvikalpa, where the mind has no role and only pure awareness.
Yeah.
Or let's say awareness, as you said, awareness and existence will play.
Yeah. Now,
I mean, like I mentioned last week, the week before last, I had an experience years ago abroad with a guy from Osho. And I used to wonder if that guy didn't tap me on my shoulder, what would have happened?
Nirvikalpa Samadhi takes some time to come to a place where, like deep sleep, there is no more individual, but I am there. So the only difference between deep sleep and Nirvikalpa Samadhi is in deep sleep, I don't know that I'm free. In Nirvikalpa Samadhi, I know that I'm free. And I'll talk about the technicalities of this much later. Now look at this. Same thing, just like in deep sleep, the fact that I want to attain Nirvikalpa Samadhi and therefore get rid of my body and mind, why would you do that unless you knew that you have to be free of the body and mind? In other words, you want to get rid of that which you know doesn't belong to me. Otherwise, who would be going to Nirvikalpa Samadhi, which we, by the way, say is the highest temporary state of non-dual experience? It's an induced state, but it's not what Advaita Vedanta is pointing you to. It's just another experience. We're showing you something much larger than what Nirvikalpa Samadhi can show you, but still, it's a great indicator. It's a great metaphor. So this means even a yogi who is yet to understand their nature, what they're looking for is freedom from my incidental attributes. So it's one more tool to show you have to be much bigger than just your body and mind. Otherwise, you would not be striving for 20 plus years to attain Nirvikalpa Samadhi. Purnamada, Purnamidam, Purnat, Purnamudachyate, Purnasya, Purnamadaya, Purnamidva Avashishyate. Om Shanti, Shanti, Shanti.